College Democrats, and on behalf of our club, I welcome you to tonight's Indiana House District 26 Democratic Candidate Forum. For the past 8 years, this district has been represented by Republican Randy Truitt, but he decided not to run for re-election this year. This means that both parties will be putting up a good fight to earn this spot. And with the current Republican majority in the State House, this district will prove to be a valuable one for the Democratic Party should they win it. Tonight, we will be hearing from the two candidates who hope to win the primary on May 3rd that will choose who goes head-to-head against the Republican nominee. The two candidates are Dr. Deanna McMillan and Dr. Vicki Weisty. I will let the candidates introduce themselves in just a minute, but before they do, let me first discuss the format of tonight's event. The College Democrats have decided on some questions that we would like to ask the candidates, so we will begin by asking these questions first. Each candidate will get 3 minutes to respond. Priya Malik, our financial director, will be keeping track of time and giving time signals as necessary. Where do you want to explain the time signals?
Sure. So the yellow card will represent 1 minute left, and then the red will be 30 seconds.
Perfect. So, however, we do hope to keep the audience involved in the process as well. And so we have note cards that are in front of each of you. So if you have a question, you can write the question down. And Andrew Moody, our director of voter registration, will be walking around and picking up the cards, and then he'll give them to me, and I'll ask them to the candidates. And I will then field these questions, and the same time constraints will apply. The time constraints are 3 minutes for each candidate. And so the event is also being recorded by our lovely Vice President, Lisa, and it will be posted on the Purdue College Democrats YouTube page later, and we will be sure to give both of the candidates links as well, so that way they can send it out to their followers. So, does anyone have any questions before I begin? No? Okay, then let's get started. So, the first question, I guess we didn't determine who would go first, but we'll just let Dr. D go first if you would like to introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Deanna McMillan, and I go by Dr. D. I'd like to say I really appreciate the opportunity to come on campus and not be at work. And I'll share a little bit about my background. I'm a first-generation college graduate. I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Pennsylvania, and my first day on campus was the first time I was ever on a college campus. So I didn't know what a bursar was or anything. I got my master's at night while I was working full-time. It took me 6 years. I do not recommend that. And I got my doctorate while I was running my own consulting business in Philadelphia. And the reason why I went back to get my PhD is because I wanted to learn how to use Windows. Windows had come out, and I wanted to learn how to use Windows. And I also studied another language. I studied Swahili, which is a third language that I've studied. I'll tell you a little bit about my teaching experience. I taught all during the 3 years that I was at Penn State earning my doctorate. I taught undergraduate. I was an adjunct at Southeast Missouri State University. I lived in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, home of Rush Limbaugh. That was a very interesting place for a New Yorker to be. And I was the director of construction engineering internship programs here at Purdue. I'd like to also say that when I filed to run, Randy Truitt was running. As far as we knew, he had not announced his retirement. I announced that I was running, and then the next week he announced his retirement. So that just shows the strength and the power that Democrats had. My husband said he just ran scared when he heard a Democrat was running. Okay, so my work experience, I started off working for a utility company. I've done internships at Miller Brewing Company and Eastman Kodak. I had my own minority business, certified minority business in engineering consulting. I worked for 10 years for Procter & Gamble building manufacturing plants. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I do now. I'm an adjunct professor at Ivy Tech. I'm a certified OSHA trainer. I'm a crisis center volunteer. I'm certified in mental health first aid. I'm a rape survivor advocate. I'm a certified healthcare navigator with the Affordable Care Act and a community health worker. I'm a Red Cross, a disaster area team volunteer, and a church trustee, and I sing alto. So I'll stop there and I'll answer some more questions later. I just wanted to give you an idea of what my background is.
That's interesting, Deanna. I sing alto too.
Maybe we can do a duet.
We should do some a cappella. Hi, everybody. It's really good to be here. My name's Vicki Weisty. I've lived in West Lafayette for 17 years, and my husband and I, my husband's right there, Yeah, the one looking like he doesn't know me. He's actually in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, which is why we came to West Lafayette. And we have raised our 4 children here. Our oldest, Helen, is actually in West Lafayette right now, even though she's a student at that university to the south that shall not be named, for Panic at the Disco. So we'll get you all out of here in time for Panic at the Disco. And then our other 3 children are all still in high school. My second oldest will, in fact, join you as a Boilermaker in the fall. And then our other 2 children are junior and freshmen. So very soon, they will all be off to college, we hope. I have an academic background as well. It's rather unusual to have 2 candidates on one side of the ticket or even on both sides of the ticket that both hold PhDs. Mine is in jurisprudence and social policy. I earned it at the University of California, Berkeley, along with a master's in the same subject, and my BA was from the University of Virginia. I have had teaching experience at Amherst College, Northwestern University, IUPUI, and Cairo University in Egypt, where 5 years ago I was part of the LLM program that IU Indianapolis Law School was running at the time, and it was 6 months after the first Egyptian revolution, and my job was to teach an introduction to the American legal system. And that was one of the most fascinating teaching experiences of my life. And unfortunately, USAID decided not to continue to fund that program, which is too bad because a lot of educated lawyers in the Middle East really do admire our system of constitutional democracy, and they're eager to learn more about it. I've written books on the history of agricultural regulation and the history of hate speech, and right now I'm working on a project involving the Westboro Baptist Church, which raises interesting questions about law, legal meaning, and speech rights, and the harm that speech does. But I am running for office because, seriously? Okay, I'm running for office because this is my home now, because I care, and because all of us, including students, deserve better than what we've gotten from our legislature in the last several years. And so I'm running to be the voice for District 26 that we all need and deserve.
Thank you. All right, so let's just get started with some questions. So the first question we wanted to ask, because as college students, we're all really focused about the cost, of course, of our college education. So what steps, if elected, would you take to make higher education more affordable in Indiana? And we'll start with Dr. D.
Oh, okay. You sure you don't want to go back and forth?
We can switch. I'll do it.
Okay.
Sure,
Start.
okay, yeah.
Whoops.
I want to be fair.
Can't spell. Bility. This is something that I, as a former college student and the parent of current and soon-to-be college students, care a great deal about. So, why does higher education cost so much? There's actually been a lot done to explain that. But one thing that is clear is that public investment in higher education has shrunk to almost nothing. When I went to college in 1979 as an undergraduate, I went to an out-of-state school that cost $4,400 a year. That same school today, if any of my children were to go, would cost more than 10 times that amount. And most schools, public and private, well, more public than private, expect you to finance your own education with high interest loans. Student loans cost more in interest than banks have to pay when they borrow from the government. I'm channeling Elizabeth Warren here. This is nothing new if you've been paying attention to anything that she has said since she ran for Senate. And even before that, when she was arguing for the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau. So the first thing we do is we push for the federal government to enact her reforms for student loans that lower the cost of interest to students. But we also push, I think more philosophically, for government to reinvest in higher education, both at the state level and the federal level, and in particular to invest in financial aid that doesn't need to be repaid.
Great.
I'm pandering totally.
Well, I was first generation college student because there was no money to send my family to college. So that's something near and dear to my heart. And unfortunately, I'm 52 years old and I haven't repaid my student loans. So that is, right now I should be ready for retirement. So I would never wish this situation on anyone. And I will also say that I did not take advantage of the opportunity of a state school. I think there should be a distinct advantage for those who have the opportunity to go to school in state. I think they should have a sliding scale that works for everyone. If you go to the University of Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is not a state, it's $100 per credit. And anybody can go to the University of Puerto Rico. If you can do it in Puerto Rico, you can do it in any state of the union. So I think that, number one, the university should be held accountable if they get state funds, which they do, and they get federal funds, which they do, to make it more affordable for students to go to school. I also think, and I was the director of internships, that if you agree to work in the field that you're studying and there's a benefit, a domestic benefit, a benefit to the United States, whatever industry it is, educational industry, manufacturing industry, social work, I think that should give you credits that would deduct the amount of student loans that you have to repay. And also, I think the repayment plan should be on a sliding scale with the salary that you're earning, not just boom, 9 months after you get out of school, this is what your payment is going to be. So I think the government should work with you on the front end. I think the university should make it more affordable. And I also think that there should be a scale of how you pay it back according to your contributions. Your contributions in terms of the industry that you work in and the benefit to society at large and the related industry. Thank you.
Great. And while we're keeping on the subject of college students, we do have an audience question. So Purdue early voting is currently 1 day on campus. I believe it's next Tuesday from 9 to 4, with election day occurring during finals week. So assuming law could be readily changed, should Purdue's voting hours be changed to reflect the student's lifestyle, i.e. voting available at night? And we'll start with Dr. D.
Absolutely. I don't know who this guy is, but he said, call the office and make sure that it's extended to 9. And I know finals go late at night. It absolutely should be extended. I mean, there's no question. I mean, there's no question. And those places that are extended should be readily available and posted so everybody can see them on campus, which there's nothing posted. I mean, not even the names of the buildings are posted where you can readily see them. So I think it should be made very available, and I think it should be made very visible. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, this is a really great example of why down ballot races matter. The government entity that set Purdue's early voting hours was the Tippecanoe County Council. There is not a single Democrat elected to that board. They set up this schedule a couple of months ago, and to be fair and to be honest, their explanation is that they based this year's schedule on previous year's voting levels. I remember, though, recruiting students to vote in 2008, and the line to vote at the Stewart Center went out the building and down the mall. So unfortunately, by the time Ben Carson, who is the kid who was really great about spreading the word on this, called all of our attention to it, it was simply too late for the Board of Elections, which is run in a bipartisan way, to change the schedule. So here's what we do. We remember this, and we make sure we show up in the fall and make our views clear about what student voting hours need to be. And it's so obvious that, of course, students live a different rhythm of life than working folks. And so, yes, we need after-hours voting, and we need more than 1 day. So that's your Tippecanoe County Council for you. I would say look carefully on your down-ballot elections, both in May and again in November, because those offices have a lot of power over what happens in our lives, and you've just seen it.
Great. So then again, continuing with education, we do have another audience question that's somewhat related. Everyone is concerned about jobs today, and even college students are struggling to find work, and these bright minds could be very big for economic game changes. So besides just jobs in general, what are your thoughts on supporting entrepreneurs?
Okay, this is me first, right?
Yes.
I believe. Okay. I'm going to start by observing what may be obvious to all of you, and that is that Indiana has not had one bit of the Obama recovery saturate into our area. We are still worse off in terms of employment and in terms of median income household than we were in 2007. We have not gotten back to where we were. So right there, that tells you something about what the state hasn't been paying attention to. So how do we go about fixing this? There's so many ways into this problem. I'll just mention a few. One of the favorite tactics of local governments and state governments is to give corporations tax credits and tax abatements to come and locate a plant here. If you've been following the news, you know that Carrier, which makes air conditioners in Indianapolis, announced that despite the receipt of millions of dollars in these tax credits, they are pulling up stakes and moving to Mexico where they can pay workers $3 an hour. So what did the state do? Nothing. They didn't ask for the money back. They didn't penalize Carrier in any way. And they had the chance in session, this past legislative session, they didn't do it. So one of the things we've got to do is actually give carrot and stick incentives. Sure, offer tax abatements, offer tax credits, offer to improve infrastructure so that companies that need, sewer and water and, whatever they need in order to build manufacturing plants, that they have those things. But make sure they understand that if we invest in them, we expect a fair return on the investment. You can't just pull out because you don't want to pay fair wage to American workers. So, where am I? I've got a little time. I think we here in Tippecanoe County have been immunized from a lot of the worst effects of the recession because we are so lucky. We've got the Purdue Research Park, we have a really vibrant agricultural center, and we've got a lot of solid industrial employers that have stayed put. We've got SIA, we've got Wabash, we've got Alcoa. So a lot of people are really lucky because they've been able to keep their jobs, but they need their wages to keep pace with the cost of living and inflation. So that's something I would want to work on as a public official. It's something I've studied my whole entire life is this weird relationship between private sector entities and government. And frankly, quick history lesson, there has always been a back and forth. There has always been an exchange of benefits and received and benefits given. So this is nothing new. We can do this.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm actually going to address your question, which was about entrepreneurship. There was a recent legislature that had increased the amount of time for enterprise zones. The enterprise zones are basically set up geographical areas, certain zip codes that are set up to encourage business. Now, this is very timely because the Restate project that's here in the West Lafayette area is set up to actually pay for the project after it's complete in 2018 with tax revenues that's generated from businesses that start up in this area. So I think that is a tremendous advantage to West Lafayette. So anyone who starts up businesses within this area, the taxes that they generate, because Purdue doesn't pay the taxes that they generate adjacent to all the development that's taking place, which is $22 million worth of work, is actually going to pay for the project in 2018. I think that's a tremendous investment and encouragement to entrepreneurship. And we have a fabulous entrepreneurship center here on campus. If you've gone to any of the forums that they encourage people to present their new ideas and their new projects, they work very closely with Purdue Research Foundation and Purdue Research Park. So I think we have a great opportunity for entrepreneurship. How do you get to them? You get to them by working with the people who are building and establishing those businesses. And the fact that the students have to ask those questions, I think is abysmal because it's really within walking distance of here. So I think Purdue needs to do a better job of introducing the business opportunities to the students while you're still in school. The other thing is, I disagree with Vicki. There is the President Obama stimulus program. The program that I teach in right now is directly impacting this area. This is money that is set aside. It's a joint venture between Ivy Tech, Work One, and also the businesses to encourage people to get their education, to get certified, to get living wage jobs, and it now is going to continue to pay for their education as long as they stay in the program. So I think that's a way of coming through with certification, coming through with business opportunities. Indiana is number 6 in the country, growing with manufacturing, and also continue to pay for their education. Thank you.
Thank you. So then switching up the topics a little bit, we'll go to another audience question, which is, how would each of you have voted on Indiana's most recent abortion bill? I believe the exact number was 1337. And if elected, how would you vote on future reproductive health legislation? So we'll start with Dr. D, I believe, this time.
I think it's unfortunate that we're having this conversation, and I support a woman's right to choose no matter what. Not have to give your name, not to give your reason, not to give your, that's between you and God, or you or the Creator. I do not agree with any legislature that makes it more difficult, makes it more cumbersome, makes it more public. And notice that the information that has to be given is only the mother. So I have a problem with that. So I would not vote in favor with any legislature that requires women to provide a reason to any medical records, anything that could be made public, for what purpose? So I would not vote in favor of anything like that, unless I have to give a codicil, unless it was the extreme will of the people who I represent, which means I would have no choice. I would have no choice but to vote in favor of the constituents that I represent. But my personal opinion is that everyone should be able to make a choice. If you want to smoke a cigarette, if you want to smoke a joint, if you want to cut your hand off, that is your decision to make. And I do not think it should be legislated, and I do not think it should be reported, and I do not think that people should be intimidated in providing that kind of information, under the guise of protecting some other rights.
Yeah, I agree with Deanna in principle, although I think you used some weird examples right there. If you cut your hand off, they're probably going to take you in for a psych exam. But I don't think that's the point here. I think the point here is, why are male legislators getting to make these medical decisions for women and usurping the role of their physicians? I would not have voted for 1337 under any circumstances. And I say that as a practicing Catholic. I believe in the primacy of the individual conscience. I believe in constitutional equality for men and women. And I do not believe that the state of abortion regulation today is compatible with equal rights for women. I mean, it's really odd, isn't it? Not only do they want to control what women choose to do if they should become pregnant, they want to make it impossible for women to avoid pregnancy by denying access to birth control under the ACA. And part of what was really pernicious last year about what the legislature was up to was that it gave corporations the right to express religious beliefs as a defense to any allegation of discrimination. So what I think this represents is a massive philosophical and ideological overreach. It's also one of the reasons that I ran, because I think we've got to have more and different voices in the legislature to counterbalance this tendency to sort of keep upping the ante on hot-button social issues that are, in fact, not really that much of an issue for us here in Indiana or even in the country. The abortion rate now is as low as it's ever been since Roe versus Wade in 1973. So really, what is this about? That's my question. What are they really trying to do? And if it's to get women out of the workplace and make it impossible for them to support their families, this is a really good step. Because if you imprison women in their biological state and you as Deanna says, if you refuse to acknowledge that it takes usually a sperm and an egg to create a pregnancy, then you're completely missing the point. This is an anti-woman movement. This is a movement born of paranoia about sex, and sex that isn't procreative. And for me, as a Catholic, I simply do not believe that public officials may impose their religious beliefs on anyone else.
Thank you. So now we're just going to keep going with audience questions. So could you please share your thoughts on how we can increase access to mental health and addiction treatment and prevention resources, in particular with our student population that is showing the national trend of increased anxiety and depression?
Well, I deal with this with my own children, so this is one of the issues that's probably closest to me personally. It boggles the mind that Purdue has on staff 2 mental health care providers for the entire student population, and one of them is not even full-time. Anyone who was here 2 years ago and remembers the murder of Andrew Bolt by a fellow student who was clearly mentally ill, who went to student health and asked for help and did not get it, knows that universities have a huge problem on their hands and they are burying their heads in the sand. So I would argue that the provision of adequate proportions of healthcare providers in psychology and psychiatry and addiction and intervention should be one of our highest priorities. And there are lots of ways in which we can encourage med schools and insurance companies and healthcare providers to train and recruit people to work in these areas. You start in school, you start offering scholarships, you can set up jobs for people to come to underserved areas and make it worth their while to take them. This is not rocket science. But if you talk to people in the field today of mental health, of psychology and psychiatry, it's just not seen as that remunerative. It's not seen as a great thing to do to pay off your med school loans when you've just, put $120,000 into loans. So again, it's part of a much bigger structural problem where education is way too expensive and we aren't getting people to train in the fields that we so desperately need. So that would be part of a bigger sort of educational reform that I would support. And I definitely believe that it will pay for itself. If we take care of people's mental health, we will have a healthier society. Thank you.
Can you ask the question again? I want to make sure I answer it.
Yeah, sure. Could you please share your thoughts on how we can increase access to mental health and addiction treatment and prevention resources, in particular with our student population that is showing the national trend of increased anxiety and depression?
Okay, I have so much. I just want to make sure that I answer your question in the 3 minutes. I will share that I'm a degreed engineer. I am a crisis center volunteer currently. I usually do the overnight shifts. And I am also a rape survivor advocate. And I'm certified in the Affordable Care Act and the health services that are now available through the Affordable Care Act that were not available prior to the Affordable Care Act. So one of the things that I know the conversation that's going on is increasing the services that are available on campus. I totally disagree with that. There is not enough resources that can be offered on campus to address some of these mental health issues. However, I'm also certified in mental health first aid, and this technology came out of Australia, where it's not weird or it's not a problem if you have mental health disorders. So I think it's very important to leave it to the professionals to provide access to these services and to make them readily available. The number to the crisis center is 742-0247. We see a surge in calls this time of year. And we deal with everything from, I'm not going to pass my classes, I don't want my parents to know, to, I'm high, I'm drunk, I'm not going to stay in school. We deal with all kinds of issues. So I think it should be okay, and I think it should be readily available, and I don't think it should be the burden on the campus. However, the dean of students and those people who have access, the counselors, they need to understand what the signs are. Mental health issues are prevalent, and those people who deal with the whole population, 1 in 4 individuals deal with mental health. So if 1 in 4, how many people in this room deal with mental health issues? So the people who counsel them should have knowledge of the symptoms and should have knowledge of the services and make it readily available. I've done that. I do it every week, every month. I'm on the phones with people who have mental health issues or social issues. And so my education of this in this area and my desire to prevent it is something that I take very seriously every week, and I think it should be made readily available throughout the campus and not be vilified. Thank you.
As you probably know, the brain drain is a huge problem in the state of Indiana. This is a place that young, educated people want to flee from. Do you have any ideas for how to make Indiana a desirable place for young people to live? I believe this is Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. As I said, I taught here for 3 years, but my primary responsibility was the director of internships, construction engineering internships. And if you know anybody in that program, their first summer they worked for $14 an hour. This was in 2007. Second summer, $15 an hour. Third summer, $16 an hour. And by the time they graduated, the average salary of the students that I dealt with, and it was over 300, was $55,000+ a year. Now, engineering shouldn't be that different from all the other majors, and for some reason at Purdue it is. One of the things that I think that you should do is you should provide the outcomes and the skills that are associated with the major to the employers so that people have internships that are paid. I think internship, maybe not co-ops because you get credit, but I think internships where you don't get paid are stupid. And then it doesn't show what your earning capability is. So, I mean, look, at the Crisis Center, we volunteer, and it's like 1,000 psychology majors. The reason why they're there is because they can show that they can deal with people with mental health issues. I think they should get paid to do that. I think they should have the ability to do that. I ran a successful internship program, and it was a requirement to have those 3 paid internships to graduate. And one of the things that impacted me in that job is when the jobs shrank, then people's ability to graduate shrank. And so I think that as internship director, not as professor, as internship director, it was my job to indicate to the companies why these students should be paid and paid well. And I think that should be the job of the advisors and the people who do career services here at Purdue. We have articulation agreements that say Purdue students, when they finish these classes, they can do these things. So why are you talking about grades to employers? They don't need to know what your grades are. They need to know you passed and you graduated. What they need to know, and what the professors and all the personnel who support students need to share, is what they are capable of doing that you're willing to pay for, and why you should pay them good wages immediately versus having them work for free and hope things work out in the future. So I think it is imperative that we show what students can do while they're at school, so when they graduate, they will be well employed and employable. And I think that will make a big difference with people leaving this area.
Okay, so the question was about brain drain.
Yes.
And about young people graduating from our universities and not staying in Indiana because they don't see it as a very attractive place to live. We are a net exporter of college graduates. So what the university needs to start thinking, universities need to start thinking about much more directly than they do, is placement. Where are recruiters coming from to recruit Purdue and IU students and Ball State students? and ISU students? Where are they coming from, and why are they pulling so many of our best and our brightest out of the state? And why do our kids finish college and think, I don't want to stay here? Quite frankly, it's because we're not making Indiana a very attractive place to be. And I lay that squarely at the feet of the legislature. When you start legalizing discrimination against a whole class of people, you're basically saying to employers, you might not be able to hire the most talented, the most qualified person, because that person's gay and they won't want to come and live in Indiana because someone could decide not to sell them a pizza. That's, to me, where the rubber meets the road. As soon as you start, as a legal public source of authority, as soon as you start drawing lines between different groups of citizens, you are saying, this state is not progressive. This state is not a place where you can be who you are and live your life. You know? So aside from the economic problems, aside from the issues of jobs and competitive salaries, we've got to make Indiana into a place where common sense prevails, where people who are figuring out who they are still can decide to set roots down in a place like, Muncie, and see what it's like without having the sort of immediate sort of throat-gagging response of, why would I go live there, right? And there are too many Indiana towns that have a reputation. Last week was actually the anniversary of the death of Ryan White. And it made me think for a minute about how much has changed since then. But not enough.
So going off of the subject of the LGBT population, what reasonable legislation could Indiana pass to make Indiana a safer environment for the LGBT community, a community that is typically discriminated against?
You pass a law that says under no circumstances is it legal to discriminate against people on the basis of their sexual identification or of transgender status or agender status or any other of the categories that come together under the LGBTQA grouping. It's just that simple. You stop discriminating against people, and you make it clear that there will be penalties for people who do. When you own a business and you open your doors to the public, unless they're not wearing shoes and a shirt, you are by law required to give them the same quality of service that you would give somebody that you approve of. So it's very, to me, as a constitutional and legal historian, it's very cut and dried. And we've been down this road before. And we simply have to, enlarge the circle and redefine what inclusivity means to us.
I have a very emotional response to this question. I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community. However, I've been refused service and discriminated against in the state of Indiana when I walk in the door, and they don't know my sexual orientation. I'm talking about in the last 12 months. So I don't think we need to pass legislation to tell people to treat people fairly. And I disagree with Vicki. They don't have to serve you. Now, if they decide to serve you, they're supposed to give you the same class of service. But the police officer told me that they don't have to serve you. They have the right to refuse you service. So that's what the police officer told me as they jumped out of the vehicle and ran in to see what the disturbance was. Okay, so I'm just saying, I don't think that's the legislature that needs to be passed. I think it should be a felony for hate crimes. That's what I think. So, run tell that. You beat somebody, you film somebody, you spit on somebody, you call somebody names or whatever the case may be. You have it on YouTube, on your phone or whatever. I think that those people should be prosecuted. I don't think we need any new legislature to tell people to treat people like people. Whatever the issue is. If you have mental illness, if you have, four fingers on one hand. I know I'm doing a lot of cut off your hand analogies. I'm just saying, you should be able to come and live here. And I teach all over the state, and I tell you, I have to be very careful where I go. I have to ask people if it's okay to drive through this area after dark and stuff like that, so I agree with Vicki that it's very, it's not a foredrawn conclusion that you can come here and be welcomed with open arms, but I don't think we need to pass any legislature for people to be treated safely. I think the people who don't treat people well need to be prosecuted. And I think it needs to be, and I'm talking about domestic violence, I'm talking about sexual, rape. These people need to be prosecuted. The people who do things are not prosecuted enough in this area. I have been in court several times. So I don't think we need to pass legislature. That's the answer to the question. I told you I was emotional. I'll stop.
Can I just say something really quick to that, or is that a violation of the rules? Okay, I won't.
No, it's more just that since we haven't been doing it all along, I don't want to be
Okay.
unfair to either of the people.
There's just so much I would want to say at that point. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on concealed carry on campus and this district, and how would you approach legislation on these subjects?
I start.
Yes.
Haven't we had enough? Really? There is no reason. There's no deer hunting or bear hunting on campus. I saw a man with, I think it was, I don't know what it was. I grew up in New York City, which is one of the, most violent places on the planet. But you do not need a weapon to go to your grocer's freezer. Why was he going to get milk with a weapon? It's not necessary. It's not necessary to come on campus. It's just not necessary. I'm telling you, when we had that incident on campus, I was teaching in a bioengineering building, and that was not with a gun. And, look at what happened. Look at what happened. And so you have mental health issues, it's finals time, and stuff like that. There's enough drama without allowing people to carry a gun. What do you need a gun for on campus? What do you need a gun for? You don't need a gun. If you want to go shoot, go shoot. You want to go to school. But no, you don't need, there's a lot of places where you don't need a gun. In the grocery store is one, and on campus is the other. It's just not necessary. I'm done.
Oh, okay.
I'm done. I'm sorry. Thank you.
The problem is this. There are a lot of people who feel as Deanna does. And that there's also a very powerful, relatively small in number, very well-funded group called the NRA that isn't going to rest until people are carrying guns everywhere. We beat back concealed carry this year in the legislature. But don't think that means it's gone for good. You have to understand what people who are pro-gun think. You have to understand the logic of their beliefs. You have to understand that it's an ideology for them. It's a commitment that to them is unalterable. And we have to be just as committed to pushing back against the invasion of guns into the public space. I would go far beyond what Deanna has just said, not just schools and grocery stores, but parks, hospitals, cars parked in school parking lots, which is still legal in the state. We used to live in a society in which reasonable gun regulation was acceptable. And it's odd that in response to a swiftly rising tsunami of mass shootings in the last 17 years, the NRA has pulled away from its customary reasonable acceptance of reasonable gun regulations and decided that the only tenable position for them to take is no guns regulated in any way. That's not the history of this country. It's not even the history of the NRA. 80% of the state of Indiana favors universal background checks. We can't get it through the legislature. That's where we start. We have to start by making it clear in the legislature that we are not going to let this powerful gun lobby determine what our culture is going to decide is reasonable as a threat to our safety and our children's safety. And that's it.
So this is more of just a general question, but this seat was last held by a Republican. So if you win the primary, how would you win the seat over a Republican, and what qualities would you bring to the table to convince voters to vote for you over the Republican candidate?
Okay. This district, even after the redistricting in 2011, here's the district outline, is majority Democratic, 53% to 47%. So what that tells us is that we're robustly purple, that people don't always make decisions here about how they're going to vote based on party labels. They vote based on who they think is the best person for the job. That's what the insiders call the Tippecanoe County way. That's how we are here. We're not rigid. We're not sort of party first kinds of people, but we use our party labels to help orient people to where we stand in general. So when I say I'm a Democrat, that means I believe in organized labor. It means I believe in a living wage. It means I believe in the constitutional ideals of individual freedom. But I also believe that we act collectively. And I think that people here in our district believe that too. So the way we go about beating the other side in November is we put our cases clearly and as persuasively as we can. That what's going on right now in the legislature means that no Republican from this district is going to be able to represent us. And that's why Randy Truitt stepped down, because he could not vote what his constituents wanted and still remain a member of his party. He made a number of votes that had lost him support, and he made a number of votes that people really liked. So he would have been a very interesting race this year if it had been Deanna against Randy. But it isn't. And you don't get to dibs seats in politics, by the way. I've been thinking about this seat for the last 2 election cycles. Taking on an incumbent is no easy feat. And you gotta have name recognition to do it. It's much easier to do that against other people who don't have name recognition than it is against a 4-time incumbent of the legislature and a 3-time city council member before that. So we're going to be hitting the pavement. We are absolutely going to be taking it to the voters. And we're going to show them that even though we call ourselves Democrat, we believe that all points of view need to be heard. And that's what we think the legislature should reflect.
I think I've demonstrated that I was not afraid to run against an incumbent who is very well thought of and people recognize at the basketball games. And my name may not be well known. And I believe that the principles and the values of the people who live in this district will prevail. That's why I ran. I have a very good relationship with John Dennis and Tony Roseworski, and I think they've demonstrated the ability, regardless of the party that you're affiliated with, to get a lot of work done. I think those issues of interest in West Lafayette, people will vote for the person or party that best represents their interest. There's no question that people are concerned and interested in infrastructure. Not only am I a degreed civil engineer, but I'm a practicing civil engineer. And I've spent quite a few hours studying what's going to be going on in this area from an infrastructure standpoint, from a company standpoint, from a revenue standpoint. how it will impact education, how it will impact growth and development in this area, how it will impact green space, how will it, if the width of the sidewalks will be increased. There'll be ability to have environmental issues brought to light, so it'll be a friendlier, more pleasant area. I think that no matter who, red or blue, votes, they'll be interested in someone who can protect their interests as far as infrastructure, as far as the businesses, as far as the educational system, as far as making the students from this area who have the best education available in the state competitive with anyone in the country or anyone from outside of the country that comes into this area. So I think we have very educated voters, and one of the things that I would work hard to do, regardless of which one of us win, is to make sure that Democrats have the information and come out and vote. I think that will make all the difference, because we have a lot of people who don't vote, and I was told college students don't vote, and I was like, I bet they will. I bet college students will vote. I was told that this population is not very active. So getting the word out in forums like this, I think, is very important in having us win in November.
How do you think you will work with the Republican-dominated House to pass productive legislation?
To start?
Yes.
Educate them, number one. And as Vicki said, get the word out and have those of us on the Democratic side vocalize what's important to us. Let the Republicans know that we're a force to be reckoned with. I did not get the impression that those issues of interest in legislature were so dominant amongst the Democrats in this area that Randy Truitt had no choice but to include our interests. I did not get that impression by speaking to anyone in government. So I think that the Republicans that are in the House and in the Senate could use some education in terms of what is good for the population of Indiana. Some of the legislature that we're talking about now with, you know, the LGBTQ community and the sewer systems, they have an impact on whether people want to come to this area. And the economic impact, or the detraction and the lack of business that comes to this area, we don't even know how much business can be lost. So I think if we look at the bottom line, we look at the economic development, we look at the job situation, people's ability to support their families, I think that is what has had John Dennis and Tony Rosworski work together and bring the Greater Lafayette area business and development. And I think we can continue to rationalize and educate those Republicans to work in the best interest of all the constituents in this district and in the state. Thank you.
Okay, I've actually spent time going to the legislature, talking to legislators, not just my own. And it's my sense that the issue isn't that they don't know what's good for Indiana or what's good for Hoosiers. It's that they have a very different idea about what that good is. And so I would argue, on the basis of my work as a historian in law and public policy and legislation and regulation, that just going to Indianapolis and saying, we're going to educate you, as long as they have 71 votes and we only have 29, they don't have to listen, and they already don't. So honestly, I'm kind of hoping that we get more Democrats into the House. And it's an uphill battle because a lot of the districts are really drawn to be safe for Republicans. But if I were to get there, if I were to be elected in the fall, after being chosen in the primary, my approach would be to try to use examples of Indiana's past progressive history, when people finally actually were able to come together and arrive either at a compromise or at a new conception of what constitutes the public good. I honestly believe that in not too much more time, enough Republicans are going to realize that RFRA was terrible for business. $60 million in convention traffic alone in less than a year. I'm happy for that to be the incentive, for them to change the law. But they didn't do it when they had the chance. Senator Alting wrote the legislation, and they still wouldn't pass it because they're scared of transgender people. So part of it is you actually have to bring into their experience what it's like to live in someone else's shoes. You know, they have to understand that all of these people, the whole breadth of social diversity in Indiana, we're all Hoosiers. And we have to work on a redefinition of what the public good is. And it's not just going to be our sense of what the public good is. It's going to have to include the values that the other side believes into. Because if we do exactly what they're doing, if we get the majority back, then we're no better. And we're not going to make any better progress than they did. So my hope is to be part of a different kind of conversation. One that my background in law and politics and history equip me, I think, uniquely to help begin.
Since we're running out of time for the forum, I just wanted to give both candidates the opportunity to give closing statements, not only about the forum, but just about their stances in general. So, if you're allowed to start.
Okay. This has been really, really wonderful. It's amazing to me. I mean, I do this kind of speaking all the time. Deanna's a teacher as well. But it's really true that when you come and talk to people, you really have to crystallize your ideas and present them. So thank you for coming and giving us the chance to do this. Thanks to the College Democrats and Michaela, who really worked hard to get this all set up. This is a really important election year. This is a year where we can actually push the needle a little bit back to the other side. And that's why I'm running. I think we can, with our votes and with our good candidates, change the way government does business. I really do think that we can get a hate crimes law passed in Indiana, which we don't have at the moment. I do believe that we can protect the rights of organized labor without making the environment for new business or existing business so onerous as to make them decide they'd rather pay people $2 an hour. I do believe there are ways forward. And I know this because I often get into arguments with my children in which they're absolutely convinced that we can't find a middle ground. And sometimes I get into arguments with colleagues, which are, of course, even less important. But I really have learned, and especially since moving here, you know, it's sort of in midlife, the really important lesson about how you listen to people and how you find terms of commonality, how you find analogs that work, that evoke ideas that you can build on. So I'm ready for this job. I really am. I hope you'll hire me for it. Thanks very much.
I want to touch on a couple of areas where I wasn't asked questions that I think will have a big impact on the Purdue student population and also after you graduate. First of all, my success rate as an internship director in terms of job placement was about 97%. So the students that I taught, the students that I prepared, got good salaries and got good jobs. My graduation rate, I was also head advisor, was 99%. So I think that I bring to the table, those are indicators that I bring to the table, an ability to prepare students to be competitive in whatever industry they choose. I think that's extremely important in this area. I think that will reduce the brain drain. I think it'll increase the opportunities for students and also faculty and personnel here. Some of the areas that I think that need to be addressed and where state legislature can support this campus and what happens is the shelter-in-place and emergency notification system. It is abysmal. It does not work. When there are issues on campus, you get text messages, but I refuse to enforce it on my syllabus because I was in a building, I was in Cranard, where they said shelter in place, but you couldn't lock the door. I'm not going to tell students that they need to stay in a room with somebody shooting and running through campus if you can't lock the door. So if you have to, I think that Purdue needs to work with TEMA, the Tippecanoe Emergency Management Organization, state police, and they need to work with NIXL. NIXL is a notification process that says if it's going to rain, if it's going to be a tornado, if there's some kind of shooting or anything, fire taking place. I think they need to work together. The state needs to work together, just like they do with the tornado warnings, to make sure that people are protected and they have access to information. I think the sexual assault and the rules that are associated with what happens on campus should not be a closely held secret. I think they should work with the authorities in an open fashion to make sure that people are taken care of. I see way, way, way too many students that are concerned with people getting word that they've been assaulted and they don't get the services that are available to themselves because there's this cloak and dagger secrecy. So I think that's a way that state legislature can work and support the Purdue community. Thank you, and I hope I'm elected to do that work.
Let's give both of the candidates. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to my fellow college Democrats, and thank you to Dr. Neal for basically organizing this and getting me in touch with the candidates.
Several things
so
on my calendar.
I think both of the candidates have information
The label
on both sides
dinner?
of the room,
That's
so
it, yeah.
feel free to stick around and talk to them. So thank you.